Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll get started at 6 o'clock. We're going to try to be out of here by 7:30 or just thereafter, so we'll move right into it. My name is Chris Hewitt. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Paso Robles. I am leading, in part, the process here for the public outreach and input related to cannabis. So wanted to cover, before we get into the main presentation, just some background information for everyone. First of all, why we're here tonight is a longer story than I'm going to go into, but Jay from our consulted HDL companies will get into that a little bit. But back in February, the City Council adopted updated two-year goals, which included the developments of a cannabis governance framework. So that set in motion a process and directed staff to move forward in part with a contract with HDL companies to help the city really develop that framework and the discussion. So HDL, you'll hear from them in just a moment with a presentation, but they're the ones that are helping out the city in this process. On July 19th, HDL, along with city staff, provided a presentation to the City Council. Based upon that information that the council received, they did direct staff to move forward with public outreach. So that is more recently why we're here this evening. They also are moving ahead with some other steps that we'll talk about in just a moment. As part of the community outreach, there is a community survey related to this topic that we hope everyone has had a chance to take. If not, don't worry about that long link up there. Just go to prcity.com. You'll see it right on the homepage. Click on it. That survey is going to be open until September 5th, I believe. And we'd love, if you haven't already done that, to get on there and take it. I think we've had a pretty good response, close to 700 respondents so far. It's only been open for about a week, so please do that. If, for whatever reason, you have more information that you'd like to share with staff or the council on this item, between now and probably mid-September or late September, we'd like to get your feedback too via email, so feel free to use the info@prcity.com email address and send along any further comments that you'd like, and we'll make sure to package those up and pass those along to the City Council. We do anticipate at this point in time, subject to change, but we're going to take in part this community feedback and bring that back to Council in October, where we anticipate a check-in with the council to get next steps and direction on how they'd like to move forward. So a little bit about the forum tonight. You'll notice the City Council is not sitting up here. I do want to recognize Mayor Martin, who's in the audience. Thank you, Mayor Martin, for being here. Wanted to just note that, again, this is really meant to receive your feedback and input. So again, the council's not here, but the comments that are made tonight will be summarized and provided to the City Council at that meeting date. The full recording will also be made. We are recording this. It is also streaming live out on YouTube and on the city's website. But the recording will be made available both to the public via the city's website, as well as a copy is going to be provided to the council in advance of that next discussion. We are going to try to get everybody out of here by 7:30. We got a lot of ground to cover, but that's our goal, that's our target. So keep that in mind as we're making comments. We're not going to be limiting comments to the typical 3 minutes. However, we do want to make sure that everyone's respectful of everyone's time. If you do want to catch the encore and concerts in the park, we'll do our best to try to get out of here at 7:30. Respect fellow attendees. Again, this is not meant tonight to be a debate, no matter which side of the fence you may sit on this topic. We're really looking for productive feedback and input, again, to package up and provide to the City Council. So if we could, please limit the comments to that as opposed to a debate. And then finally, questions. We'll do our best. We have several staff members in the room from different departments. If there's questions that may be applicable to an individual department or to our consultant, we'll do our best to answer those. If they do require additional information, we'd love to get your contact information and follow up with you directly for the sake of time and process tonight. So with that, I will be turning it over in just a minute to Ajay Kaluri. He is the Deputy Director of Policy and Audit for HDL Companies, works primarily on cannabis-related issues with a variety of different cities throughout the state. He'll go over their background in just a moment. In terms of the public comment period, what we're going to do after AJ is done with his presentation, which should be somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, we will simply be handing a microphone around. Again, the point there is for the public to provide, you all to provide comment and feedback as it relates to this topic, concerns or otherwise, again, related to the discussion, anything that was made in the presentation we want to get your feedback on. We'll do in person first. This is a remote hybrid meeting because, again, we're trying to reach as many people as possible. We will have a call-in option, and so we'll go to those individuals once we get done with the in-person comments. Again, trying to conclude the meeting by 7:30, again, to respect everyone's time. We'll see if we can meet that goal. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the tech team here to get us set up and introduce AJ Kaluri, and he will take it away. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it.
Okay, great. So thanks for the introduction, Chris, and thanks for having me here tonight. Again, my name is Ajay Kaluri, and I work for HDL Companies. I have about, I would say, a 25-minute presentation to go through with you all tonight. So let's just jump into it and go to the next slide. I think it's still stuck on the first slide from what I can see. So I think as we're trying to, oh, there we go, made it. So first, a little bit of background about my organization before we begin. HDL is a consulting firm that works with local government agencies. Our core services include sales tax, property tax, business licensing. One of our smaller practice areas includes cannabis consulting, where we help cities to adopt best practices for regulating the industry. We try our best to stay impartial in this space and to meet cities wherever they fall on the cannabis policy spectrum. In some cases, that could mean helping cities to maintain a ban on commercial business activity. In other cases, it could mean helping cities to expand the allowable cannabis activity. It really all depends on the needs of that specific community. Let's go to the next slide. So to kick this off, I want to give you a high-level overview of the meeting today. Some of this was already covered by city staff, but I think it bears repeating. So first, the meeting is intended to be a community discussion. And what that means is that no decisions will be made during this workshop. The goal of the workshop is to provide the community with general information about the cannabis industry, then to open it up to public comment. And during public comment, we'll do our best to document the type of feedback that's received. The plan then is to summarize that feedback for the City Council during policy discussions in October of this year. The City Council will then be asked to provide direction on next steps. That could include maintaining a ban on most commercial cannabis activity in the city, or next steps could include drafting an ordinance to allow new cannabis businesses to operate in the city. Ultimately, that's a policy decision for the City Council to make after considering input from the community. And again, we have some links here that provide you with opportunities to add your input into this process. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows the recent history of cannabis policy in Paso Robles. In 2015 and 2016, the state of California authorized commercial cannabis activity through Proposition 64. After passage of Prop 64, Paso Robles initially decided to maintain its local ban on commercial cannabis activity, but later the city formed a medical cannabis task force to study the issue. That culminated in a task force study that was released in 2017. In 2018, the City Council voted to authorize its first medicinal cannabis delivery business in the city. Also in 2018, Local voters approved a cannabis business tax through what was called Measure I. And then finally, in July of 2022, the City Council directed staff to conduct community outreach on allowing more cannabis business types in the city. In that motion, the City Council also authorized a temporary expansion on cannabis deliveries, which I'll go into in more detail on a later slide. Let's go to the next slide. So before getting too far along in this discussion, it's important first to ask, why is now a good time to reconsider cannabis policy in the city? First, state regulations for the cannabis industry have been finalized and local best practices have been developed across California. Second, community perceptions may have changed on this policy area. In many of the communities that we go into, the openness of residents to cannabis activity has grown since the passage of Proposition 64. Third, businesses are looking for places to locate, and that's particularly in regions where they have underserved populations. And finally, some local jurisdictions that maintain a ban are being hit by voter-driven ballot initiatives. These initiatives are often written by the cannabis industry and for the cannabis industry, and they don't always represent the full interests of the community because they're written by special interests. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows Proposition 64 election results in Paso Robles. As a reminder, Proposition 64 was the statewide ballot initiative that legalized cannabis activity in California. So as you can see, there was actually more support in the city for legalization than there was in the surrounding county or in the state as a whole. However, it is important to note that support or opposition to Proposition 64 should not be interpreted as support or opposition to more cannabis businesses operating locally. That is a separate question and one that City Council is exploring through this community outreach. Let's go to the next slide. So when we talk about cannabis businesses, it's also important to differentiate between the various business types. The cannabis supply chain is highly segmented, and each component can have a different impact on the community. And every community gets to decide for itself whether to allow or ban each of the individual components of the industry. Let's go to the next slide. So this chart shows the license types that exist within the cannabis supply chain. It starts with cultivators who grow the plant, manufacturers who convert the plant to other consumable goods, testing labs who verify the quality of product, and distributors who move the product from business to business, and then finally retailers who sell cannabis goods to consumers. I want to emphasize that the businesses that you see on the left side of this slide, which we call wholesalers, and that includes cultivators, manufacturers, distributors, and testing labs, they operate in what we consider at this point an oversaturated market. And what we mean by that is that there are far more wholesalers in California today than there are licensed retailers to sell product. And as a result, we expect there would likely be limited interest in wholesale businesses seeking to open a location in the city, even if the city were to allow for it. So really, the key decision before the city and before the city council is whether to prohibit or allow retail sales locally. Let's go to the next slide. So the city does currently allow some limited cannabis retail activity. However, that activity is restricted to non-storefront retail, which is what we call delivery-only retail. As the name would suggest, delivery businesses are only authorized to sell cannabis goods by delivery to a person at their home. To date, the city has issued licenses to 2 delivery-only businesses in the city. And as you can see on the slide, these businesses are only authorized to deliver cannabis to medical patients or persons with a doctor's recommendation. However, the city is currently in the process of updating local law to allow these businesses to temporarily deliver cannabis to adult use customers. And adult use customers are defined as persons who are 21 years of age or older with a government issued ID. But technically, this is still temporarily banned until those changes are made, which is why you see an X below adult use services for delivery only. Even with that allowance, once it's made, there are other cannabis retail activities that the city could authorize, specifically storefront retail, where consumers are allowed to enter the licensed business to purchase cannabis goods on site, to receive those cannabis goods, and to leave the cannabis business premise. The city currently bans storefront retail for both medical and for adult use sales. However, that all could change if the city council voted to expand commercial cannabis activity in the city. Let's go to the next slide. So when considering whether to allow storefront retail, it's important first to separate myth from reality. Very often we find that community discussions about cannabis activity center around concerns for illegal cannabis storefronts. In reality, though, licensed storefront retailers look very different than unlicensed businesses. So for example, the business on the left that you see on this slide is an unlicensed, unregulated business. It has bars on the windows. It has a green cross painted on the window. It has non-compliant signage. The business on the right is a licensed, regulated business. The sign is compliant with local code, and the overall design of the facility is consistent with surrounding uses. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide shows the interior of some licensed retail businesses. Both of the retail businesses that you see here are located in the city of Grover Beach, which gives you a sense for what two local businesses look like on the inside. Let's go to the next slide. It's also important to take a step back and look at the state and the regional environment for cannabis before making any decisions locally. Next slide. This slide shows the number of licensed cannabis businesses statewide. And as you can see, there are over 12,000 cannabis businesses in California, but less than 10% of those businesses are retailers. So as a result, there is a lot of cannabis product being produced in the state, but there are very few locations where it can be legally sold. And one of the side effects of this is that many consumers still purchase cannabis from the illicit market, despite the existence of licensed businesses in California. Next slide. This chart furthers that point. So what you see on the left is the number of cannabis retailers that self-reported taxes to the state of California prior to the passage of Proposition 64. These were mostly unlicensed, unregulated operators that voluntarily reported their taxes to the state. On the right is the total number of licensed cannabis retailers that exist in California today. And the difference that you see between those two numbers is the gap that exists between consumer demand for cannabis and what the legal market is currently able to support. As a result, most consumers continue to purchase cannabis from the unregulated and untested market. Next slide. This slide takes that same data and it maps it down to the county level. Counties that you see here with a darker shade of blue have a larger gap in the number of licensed storefront retailers and what HDL estimates to be the number needed to supply local demand. And as you can see, the county of San Luis Obispo has an estimated shortage of 9 cannabis retailers countywide, which is lower than some of the counties with much larger populations, such as the Bay Area or further south in Southern California. However, this shortage is notable given the distance that some residents of the county must travel to access licensed storefront retailers. Let's go to the next slide. So this map shows the locations of all the licensed cannabis storefront retail businesses in San Luis Obispo County and neighboring counties, individually marked using blue pin drops. And as you can see, cannabis storefront retailers are concentrated along the coast in Morro Bay, Grover Beach, and San Luis Obispo City. To the north of Paso Robles, storefront cannabis retailers are located in King City and Greenfield. Outside of that coastal region, though, there is a sizable area where storefront cannabis retail is currently banned. Next slide. This map shows the cannabis delivery services currently operating within the city. So each dot that you see here represents the advertised location of a cannabis delivery vehicle that's marketed on a website known as Weed Maps. And they're marketing that they're available for at-home delivery in that area, which includes the city. So as you can see from the map, there are actually more delivery services operating in the city than there are licenses that are issued by the city. And the reason for this is because a significant portion of commercial cannabis activity is currently taking place outside of local regulatory oversight. Next slide. So this slide identifies surrounding jurisdictions that permit cannabis activity for comparison purposes. Most of the cities that permit commercial cannabis activity in the region allow nearly all license types to operate. That includes retail, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and testing. The city of Morro Bay on this list is the most restrictive of the group. They permit retail and distribution license types only. Next slide. The next section of the presentation I'm going to cover involves cannabis regulations. Most of the regulations that I cover here today address storefront retail specifically. Let's go to the next slide. So from a high level, regulatory programs can establish facility design and location requirements. They can provide the city authority to control licensing decisions. The city can impose operating conditions that go beyond those that are already required by the state. The city can also enhance business accountability for things like security, product safety, and so forth. Next slide. So first, regarding location restrictions, as with any other business in the city, cannabis facilities are restricted to certain zones. Allowable zones would be defined by the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council. So the table that you see on this slide shows the commercial and industrial zones that exist in the city. And generally speaking, local jurisdictions typically restrict cannabis activity to commercial and industrial zones only. This map shows all of the zones that exist within the city of Paso Robles. Areas shaded in red, pink, and purple represent commercial and industrial zones. These zones primarily exist on the western and the northern portions of the city. Next slide. This map highlights commercial zones only. So these are zones that cannabis delivery businesses are currently authorized to operate within. And should the City Council decide to allow storefront retail sales, it's possible that these zones would be used as a starting point for discussion. Next slide. So in addition to zoning, the state mandates that all cannabis businesses must maintain a minimum distance of 600 feet from sensitive uses. And sensitive uses are defined as schools, commercial daycare centers, which excludes residential daycare centers, and youth centers. Local jurisdictions, however, have the authority to increase or decrease these minimum distances. They also have the authority to expand the definition of what qualifies as a sensitive use. So for example, some communities have added churches, residential properties, libraries, other public spaces to the definition of a sensitive use. What you see on the map on this slide are some sensitive uses that have already been identified by the city, and it gives you a rough sense for how they work in relation to some of the allowable zones that we discussed previously. Next slide. Common concerns about cannabis businesses are often associated with some of the categories that you see on this slide. That includes public safety, public health, neighborhood and land use impacts, as well as preventing youth access. So the goal of a well-designed regulatory program is to impose operating restrictions on businesses that mitigate these issues to the greatest extent possible. So the next few slides that I'm going to go through are meant to give you an idea of how that might work in practice. Next slide. So for public safety, the state of California, through what's called the Department of Cannabis Control, imposes minimum standards for all cannabis businesses. That includes requiring security personnel on site during all hours of operation, 24-hour video surveillance, third-party alarm monitoring systems, and DOJ and FBI criminal background checks on all owners prior to licensure. However, there are additional restrictions that the city could impose. So some best practices that we've seen that aren't currently required by the state that the city may consider include things like motion sensor lighting, security patrol when the businesses are closed, and regular inspections of businesses to ensure ongoing compliance with state and local law. Next slide. State public health requirements include third-party testing of all cannabis goods, product labeling and dosing standards, potency limits, daily purchase limits, and prohibitions on public consumption. Additional standards that the city could adopt include things like warning signage inside and outside the business, restrictions on visibility into the facility from the outside of the facility, and dedicated funding of public health programs through cannabis tax revenues. Next slide. Regarding land use protections, the state requires that all cannabis businesses maintain minimum distances from sensitive uses, which we talked about. The state also requires businesses to adopt waste disposal programs, shipping and receiving protocols, and mandatory 10 p.m. closure. The city could strengthen those restrictions by creating additional standards for things such as exterior lighting, landscaping, facility design, and further limitations on hours of operation. So for example, the state mandates 10 p.m. closure, the city could mandate 8 p.m. closure or 9 p.m. closure, for example. Next slide. Finally, and most importantly, preventing youth access is a top regulatory concern. So under state law, licensed retailers are prohibited from selling cannabis goods to persons under 21 without a doctor's recommendation, in which case it would be 18 years of age or older with a doctor's recommendation. ID verification is required prior to entry. Employees must be present at all times during business hours within the retail space. And businesses have to participate in what's called Metric, which is the state's track and trace system for all cannabis goods from the point that they're planted in the ground all the way to when they're sold to customers. The city can restrict or further restrict youth access through such actions as an underage decoy program, routine inspections of facilities, and dedicated funding for youth prevention services. In addition, the city could require annual license renewals. That's very common, and that ensures that businesses maintain their ongoing compliance with state and local laws relating to youth access to cannabis. So in other words, if a retailer provides youth access to cannabis, its license could be revoked fairly easily by the city. Next slide. So another important factor to consider when deciding whether to allow cannabis businesses is how to tax them and what rates to use. Next slide. So there are two primary ways of generating revenues from cannabis businesses, and we identify those on the slide. The city has already adopted the first method through the voter approval of Measure I, which established tax rates for all cannabis business types that could be allowed. Delivery rates are currently at 6%, while storefront rates are set at 10% of gross receipts. In addition to business license taxes, most cities adopt cannabis regulatory fees. Those fees are intended to offset the cost to the city for regulating commercial cannabis activity locally. And typically they range somewhere between $10,000 to $30,000 per business per year. Next slide. So this slide provides an illustration of potential local tax revenues if you assume two storefront retailers in the city. Please note that this is meant to be an illustration, not a projection, based upon industry averages that HDL has observed statewide. Using those averages, we assume gross receipts of $4 million per business. Actual gross receipts per business may be higher, they may be lower. It really depends on the specific operator as well as local factors. But if you assume a 10% business license gross receipts tax, That would translate to $800,000 in tax revenues plus $120,000 in sales tax revenues for a total of $920,000 in annual revenues for the city in that scenario. If you assume an 8% business license tax, that falls to $760,000, and it falls further depending on what rate you set. Next slide. So the final slide that I want to show you illustrates the standard process for adopting a cannabis regulatory program. Keep in mind that this process would be contingent upon City Council deciding to move forward with allowing additional cannabis business types to operate locally. Next slide. Step 1, which is currently in process, involves informing City Council and the community of cannabis policies and conducting community engagement. Step 2 includes a zoning and a land use analysis and evaluation of potential impacts to the neighborhoods from some of those decisions. Step 3 would involve drafting a regulatory ordinance for City Council review and approval. And after ordinance adoption, the final step would include the design and implementation of a competitive application and permitting process. There is a long way to go before that final step. Most importantly, there are key questions that the City Council would need to consider. Those questions include, first and foremost, whether to expand permitted cannabis business types in the city, what types of customers to allow in those businesses, how many businesses to permit, where those businesses can be located, and specific operating requirements for new business types. Those are some of the key questions that the city is seeking input from the community on here today, and that will be the focus for the next part of this community discussion. And let's go to the next slide. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for allowing me to present. I'll now turn it back over to city staff to open up the discussion for community input.
All right, thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. So now the time is for public comment. The way, again, we're going to do this is we're going to go past the mic style tonight. You're not going to be required to come up to the podium. There's no speaker card required. You do not have a time limit per se. Again, we've got a lot of people that will like to make comment, I can see, so we would like to, again, be respectful of everyone's time and try to move through the comments as quickly as we can. Just a reminder, and I don't know that I mentioned it earlier, this presentation will be available tomorrow or potentially this evening on the city's website, prcity.com. So if you do want a copy of that, please go there, or if you'd like, email info@prcity.com, and we'll certainly get you a copy of it. For you to take a look at. So again, with that, we're going to start the process. If I could just ask you, one, to please speak directly into the microphone, because again, we are recording this. Please state your name. If you do have any written comments that you have tonight printed, please provide them to us up here, a copy, and we will include those as part of what we're doing. So I am going to hand the mic over. I'm going to start on my right side here. Please pass the mic, and then we'll go around, come back down the left side, and we'll go from there. As I mentioned, this is, again, to receive public comment, not a debate or a forum in that respect for this evening. So with that, is there any questions on the process? Everybody's good? Yes. So, good question. In terms of the next steps, all of those, most of the questions that you're most likely referring to are ultimately a policy decision that will be made by City Council. But the information and the feedback that is received tonight through the survey, through the emails, and at future council meetings are going to all play into their decision-making process. Yes, ma'am. We can, yes. I'll get those to you. And then also, it's true that retail stores will always be able to deal in cash. Jay, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hear the questions.
The question was the cash-only nature of the business, and is it true that the businesses are only cash only?
Not necessarily cash only, but the bulk of the sales still are cash. The challenge is that a lot of credit card companies still prohibit the use of their credit cards for the sales. So the sales themselves frequently are in cash. However, cannabis businesses, many cannabis businesses at this point do have access to banking. Some of the larger banks don't provide access, but smaller banks do. There are some pretty stringent guidelines that those banks have to follow, so they may limit the total number of cannabis customers that they bank for, but cannabis businesses can get access to banking and therefore are able to store their money and then also make payments to the city by check as opposed to only in cash at this point.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to start the public comment again. Please state your name, talk into the mic, and we'll go from there.
Do I need to stand?
You can stay seated or stand, however you'd like to.
I'll stay seated. My name is Elena Garcia. I'm a longtime resident of Paso, Robles, about 34 years now. And I'm here to show support for retail cannabis storefronts here in Paso. I wrote down notes just to help me stay on track. That would include, I support having retail storefronts here in our downtown. I think that we can learn quite a bit from our friends in Grover Beach who have very quickly identified the benefits of allowing this business and seeing it as an economic development opportunity that it truly is. And I think that they're absolutely reaping the tax benefits from that. On a personal note, you know, me, myself, I'm a working professional. I use cannabis recreationally, regularly, responsibly. I would love to not have to drive to Grover Beach and other areas to spend my money, which is a good chunk of money. And I would love that revenue to be supporting my hometown of Paso, which I love dearly. So again, I'm here to support it, and I would encourage the council to really look at the data behind this and not make their decision based on any fear, stigma, or even personal beliefs. I think it's definitely time to welcome cannabis here in Paso Robles. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Camille Katz, and I grew up in the DARE years where we would wear our DARE t-shirts and they'd talk to us about all the horrible things that marijuana does and how it's a gateway drug. Imagine me as an adult finding out that the best way to control my anxiety was with medical marijuana. I also, like Elena, I agree with everything she says. I'm a working professional. I have children. I'm a better mom because I'm able to manage my anxiety because of this thing that Mother Earth gave us, you know? $2.4 million. That speaks to me. That speaks to my children. That's what Grover Beach brought in marijuana revenue last year, $2.4 million. Our schools could use that. Our children can use that. Our city can use that. Weed and wine. Doesn't that sound good together? Weed and wine. I think I can imagine myself sipping our local grapes while smoking our local weed. More than 140,000 people die from excessive alcohol use in the U.S. each year. That's from the CDC. And our whole revenue here in Paso is based on alcohol, which to me, trust me, I support wine, but like that, if we can support an industry like that, look up, I dare you to Google how many deaths there's been because of cannabis or marijuana. The answer is 0. 0 deaths. It's a safe industry as long as it's managed well and done correctly. And if you want to make people licensed, I suggest you make it as easy as possible. Maybe even be competitive with San Luis Obispo, Megan's Market, and Grover Beach, because how awesome would it be for Paso to get all that money, start making $3 million a year. I really can see weed and wine being Paso's new thing. Anyway, and it creates lots of jobs, and I'm done.
Yeah, my name is Monica Thomas, and I'm a part business owner here in the wonderful city of Paso Robles. We're one of the delivery services, currently only medicinal cannabis. We're hoping that it will expand to recreational cannabis as well. And I do want to agree on what I've heard. I used to be a very conservative mom. I didn't want my kids to touch any drug, nothing. Why do we need drugs? We can just be ourselves. But then I realized over the years, there are such things as depression, anxiety, and mental health issues. And I realized the drugs that are promoted by pharmacy have terrible side effects. And I also realized the terrible side effects of alcohol, drinking, driving, DUIs, and of course, cannabis has side effects too. But overall, I now believe that it's a safer choice if handled responsibly, if managed responsibly in the city, and have enough education for young people to know what the effects are. So I do support retail business in Paso Robles, limited number of stores. I've seen it in places like the Netherlands and Amsterdam, where it's more transparent, where it's more accessible for the public, that it's actually used more responsibly than if it's in the illicit market, and if people have to travel far distances to get it. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Hello there. My name is Lucky Thomas, son of Monica Thomas. We just recently opened our medical cannabis delivery service here in Paso. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about my father, who was a Korean War veteran. And I watched him have cannabis around at a very young age. And it changed my perception of it being, let's say, a negative drug, or however you want to classify it, as to just being purely medicine. And he suffered with schizophrenia and just so many different issues as I was growing up. And I definitely saw how cannabis was able to help him versus his regiment of pharmaceuticals that he was also, given access to. He really just wanted cannabis. And seeing him go through that and kind of creating it as a positive thing, I think I kind of developed, I saw that as it's not such a bad thing. Point is, he was disabled to the point where he would not be able to use the computer. He wouldn't be able to use the phone. He wouldn't know where to get this stuff unless he was calling one of his grower buddies to bring something through. Today, we still have that same population of people that they don't know to go on the computer and go on Weed Maps and call up their local delivery service. Where do they get this stuff? We can see it's a desert. There's a desert surrounding Paso Robles of where to get cannabis. So I just like to kind of make that known that there are disabled people that are being left in the dust by not having any storefronts. They don't know where to go, and they can't drive an hour. They can't drive an hour over the hill. They just physically can't. So I just want to make that kind of an idea to think about for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I kind of feel like I'm standing in front of a freight train. And before I go on, I want to apologize on behalf of my generation for unleashing this plague upon society. So I guess you know where I stand, but I want you to hear the words of some people who know a lot more about this than I do. I don't think this decision should be made by anecdotal stories and evidence and whatever you want to call it. So today I got some quotes from two people that are actually friends of mine, and one is the U.S. Surgeon General. U.S. Surgeon General, this is publicly available, said recent increases in access to marijuana recent accesses to marijuana and in its potency, along with misperceptions of safety of marijuana, endanger our most precious resource, our nation's youth. The next quote is from Dr. Robert DuPont. He's a fellow board member on Safe Launch, and he's the foremost expert in the area of drugs and addiction. He's written several books, one of them including Chemical Slavery. It's an excellent book if any of you want to look at it. He says, and this is just today, he just sent this today, legalization of marijuana and permitting local stores to sell marijuana normalize and increase marijuana use, including by youth, all of which is contrary to the interests of public health. Do any of you know how much enforcement is done on providing to youth? Anybody have any idea? Does anybody know what the penalty is if you're caught providing to youth? Yes, sir.
My name is Ernest Hall. I'm the face of cannabis in Paso Robles. I've been here for over 10 years doing my job.
I was just asking a question. Do you know what the fine is? Okay.
So basically, I have kids. They don't use cannabis. And I've never had my brother get crack. Use in 10 years. So that's not a problem.
If I could
Okay.
interject, please, again, the intent of the forum is to provide feedback directly to the city council, and we would appreciate it if there was not debate.
Yeah,
at this
that
point.
was
Thank you.
my mistake. I shouldn't have asked an open question like that. Apologize. The last person that I talked to today is my friend Mayor Randy Rouse in Santa Barbara. He was elected mayor last fall. He served 9 years on city council, so I'm not a doctor. I've never served in public office, never run for anything. But what he says is this, and as most of you know, cannabis has been sold in retail outlets in Santa Barbara for quite some time, over 10 years. He says everything about pot has been fabricated, so for the initial medical use was the red herring that got the camel's toe in the tent. The Wild West mentality about limits made it so that the industry outproduced its capacity to hold a firm market, stable price structure. Make it like alcohol was the buzz phrase for a while, but there is no equivalent taxing structure, no tracking on production, transport or delivery, and no usable way to test for DUI. The proliferation of legal sales has not limited the black market one bit. In fact, it functions now with more impunity than ever. Santa Barbara is suffering thanks to overzealous, overpaid politicians who sold out their community for a few dollars. The industry is never satisfied, however, and will ask for more in perpetuity in terms of deregulation and tax relief. Lastly, the complete disregard for the developing brains of our youth to satisfy the hedonistic need to alter reality is a tragic turn in the trajectory of a successful future generation. And I would add that he's a registered Democrat, as is Dr. Robert DuPont. So I hope all of you research this and think about it really carefully. Our youth are at stake. There's no way that we can come up with a regulatory. I know that the presentation and the survey assumes a fait accompli, that this is just going to happen and we just have to figure out how to make it happen. There are certain things that you cannot stop from getting into the hands of youth, and when you sell it from a retail storefront, you reduce the perception of harm on behalf of our youth. They decide, well, it's legal and it's being sold in the store, it must be okay. Has any of you heard of cannabis-induced psychosis? I went to a seminar in Colorado a couple of weeks ago and spoke with 3 emergency room doctors who told me that 30% of their time is spent dealing with cannabis-induced psychosis. And they've been in this cannabis business longer than any of us has. So they know what's going on. Think about it, folks. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, my name is Grace Hall. I, along with my husband, Ernest Hall, we own Dub's Green Garden. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? My name is Grace Hall, and along with my husband, Ernest Hall, we own Dub's Green Garden. We were the first medicinal delivery service that was licensed out of Paso since 2019. We've been doing this since 2012, before Prop 64 passed, getting patients their medical marijuana throughout the community, along with a lot of other delivery services that were around at that time. Some have moved on to open up storefronts in several areas in the county as well. I understand both sides of people's concerns about this, but there's a lot of people that don't know who we are, and I just want to put a face to our business. It's us too. We started this from nothing. We've worked really hard. We have 4 children aged 14, 16, 18, and 19, and they've watched us work hard and build this business up to what it is today. They're here today, and we have responsible children that don't use drugs. And that comes from what we've taught them at home and our values that we have. I'm not going to rely on somebody else's business or what's going on in the world to raise my children. They know what they're supposed to do. And I just wanted to make that a point, because I know with what's going on right now and how cannabis is moving, that's a really big trigger for a lot of people is the youth. And I myself am concerned with the youth because I have 4 teenagers. We both do. So that's what I would like to say, and I'm just looking forward to how things are moving along and what the future holds in the cannabis industry in Paso.
Hello, my name is Michael Rivera, and I have a very personal story to tell you. About 8 months ago, my great-grandnephew smoked some fentanyl-laced marijuana and died. He was 20. He didn't need to die. He was a good kid. I've known him since he was a baby. This is not a good idea. What this man said is absolutely true. What about the youth? What about their developing brains? What about our children, as many of us care about? What about our beautiful Paso Robles? You know, I've been around a long time. Linda and I have been married 50 years. We've seen it all, okay? And I'm not, you know, there is no problem here. No problem at all. You can have marijuana delivered to your door. There's not a problem here. And we do not need to open up the door to additional access to what is a very powerful drug. Cannabis is 90% THC, up to. And they'll say, oh, it's highly regulated. There's nothing that's going to be filtered into it. Well, you know, tell Aaron that. But you can't, because he's dead. It only takes once. The developing brain, people need to do their research of our youth. This man is absolutely correct. It's very dangerous. I don't care if people over the age of 21 smoke cannabis. Doesn't bother me. But they can have it delivered to them. And I have no problem with that. So with that being said, that's where I stand, and I would hope that this city council at the next meeting would table this until the next city council is seated, and then take it up at that point. I would hope that they would do that and have wisdom and do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, for speaking from Safe Launch. My name's Sherry Nelson. I'm a Paso Robles resident for over 70 years. I've seen a lot of changes in this town, and I'm sad to say that I'm seeing more potential ones to come. I'm a health professional, consultant, and researcher for the last 35 years. I specialize in neuropsychology as a voice analysis practitioner, a non-drug approach or solution for psychological and emotional stress. I am a degreed and certified expert in the field of physical and mental health. And I can tell you that when people say that drugs are the answer to anxiety or depression, I can tell you for sure that there are better answers out there. And to teach our youth or even adults that they feel a little depressed or a little anxious, to immediately go for drug is the answer, that is a lifetime of horrors and situations. Wouldn't it be better to teach our youth what kind of problems are you seeing right now? What kind of ways can we deal with this to actually make better decisions? Is going to a drug really the right thing we want to teach them to do? I am opposed to retail stores in Paso, and I ask that we keep the ban in place and keep it as is. I want to quote the Hippocratic Oath for physicians, do no harm, and I would like the city of Paso to do the same. I want to quote here, talking about age 21 and under not being able to get the drug. This is from the American Psychological Association. Studies find that opioid receptors can be permanently altered from marijuana, especially in the brain of not fully developed stage. We now know specifically that brains do not fully develop until the age of 25 or older. Now we're talking in the study permanent changes to genes, epigenetics, genes that are supposed to turn off and on and regulate it. These genes, the study says that these genes can permanently be stuck, not able to turn on or off. That is a huge health problem. I have presented to each council member these two documents. The first one is from the DEA, the Department of Justice Drug Enforcement Administration, drug fact sheet, and I have a few copies back there. What is marijuana? Marijuana is a mind-altering psychoactive drug. And on this list all of the side effects. I personally have worked with a young man a few years ago who, when he was 16, 17, from marijuana use disorder, attempted suicide. I was able to work with him later in what I do, because he was seeking solutions to help him withdraw from the drug. The other document I presented was an article in Cal Coast News last week entitled SLO County Upstarts Grab a Slice of Cannabis Kingpin's Empire. Most people now know what's happening in the county of the Board of Supervisors with payoffs, FBI investigations, regarding this industry and applying for permits in retail. This is fraught with potential horrendous stuff going on. There's a current, right now, FBI ongoing investigation right now. I'm going to ask the City Council to please delay this, at least let this investigation play out so that we have more information. We have huge, everyone knows, huge homeless situation in this county, and it's ever increasing. Mental health issues are increasing. Crime is on the rise. There was a recent report at San Luis Obispo City that since they have approved retail stores, you can say it's not connected, but these are the facts. Since 2021, just out, violent crimes have increased by 10%. Property crimes have increased by 14%. I know in Colorado, they say there's no deaths from marijuana. In Colorado, their auto accidents from deaths have increased by 75. They've increased a huge amount. And I personally saw a video of a young man that was killed by a driver driving under the influence of marijuana. So we hear all the time from our city council that they're so concerned about lawsuits and somebody suing. And I would just caution them that if you approve this and there is, God forbid, something happening, what is the liability going to be from the city for approving these retail stores? I'd like to also refer people to Jody Belcher's website, The Other Side of Cannabis. Her son, at a very young age, 2021, specifically from marijuana, suffered a psychotic break. I haven't talked to Jody in several years, but at that time, she felt the psychotic break and the mental issues that he dealt with were permanent. Again, I would ask the City Council to please do no harm. Put this off. I would never be for retail stores. People who choose to do that have a right to do that. The problem is when that happens and we have the fallout from increasing mental health issues and increasing homeless, as just happened with the county, they've added on additional staff with our tax money to address these issues. So it does come back to the non-users to have to pay for the fallout. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rod Blackner. I'm a resident of Paso Robles for the last 32 years. And I'm, again, I understand what Sheila and other people have been saying, that, and I know I can have to repeat it again and again. A lot of you have heard this before. But the sad thing is when people, I hear them talking about, oh, but look at the money we can make. Look at the money we can make. I'm like, no, come on, let's forget about the money. Look at what the effects are. Look at the long-term effects. And again, I understand that when we take a look at youth, that's a huge, huge issue. And again, there's so many studies that fall right in line with what has been said already. But I also want to tell you about the adults that I've seen. My family, we have some property up in Northern California, in Southern Humboldt and Trinity County. And it's been pathetic to see families torn apart over getting into, again, it's not just marijuana. They're getting into, it's the gateway story. But getting into that. And there is times when I've seen, yes, recreational does work. I'm not recreational, excuse me. Medicinal does work. But when you get into recreational, I've just seen it tear apart families again and again and again. And these were families who were doing well. And then they get into this, and then the next thing you know, problems just happen. And it comes again and again and again. It's just, there's lots of side effects to this. And again, we can, as been pointed out, we can go over it again and again and again, but the crime problems on a whole do increase, even though, and you can read statistics and it depends on how you pull them out of the different areas, but there's a lot of statistics that show it. Why do we need more drugs in society? Why are we making more drugs? We're just trying to give people more problems. Let's keep away from it the best we can, and that's what I would like to encourage our council to do as well.
My name's Dale Guston. I come to the city council meetings all the time. I don't trust the city council. I'll tell you why. Dan Jones came with a long petition to keep the vacation rentals out of the R1 zone. They passed an ordinance, but ordinances require 2 readings. And before the second reading, Mayor Martin said, hey, we can't do this. We're going to lose all that TOT taxes. So he talked the 3 councilmen that were remaining to vote on this, including Maria, who's long gone now, into voting for a new ordinance and dropping the one that was passed by at the insistence of many citizens in this room, probably as many as here right now. Now, what happened? She talked them down to 75. And you know what? Didn't make any difference because they grandfathered in over 200, and there's still 200 in R1. I don't trust the city council. They're going to vote for this. Fred Strong's wife uses medical marijuana. He's in favor of this. Now, on a personal note, when I was going to law school in Glendale, my son wanted me to stay until he graduated from high school. And he asked me one time if he could have a party at the house. I said, sure. Can I have marijuana? I said, no. Well, before he graduated, he ran my car into a curb or another car and lost his privileges to drive my car. I still have the car. It's a 70 Monte Carlo. It's a collectible. And so he learned his lesson. Now, he was not going to graduate because his grades went down because of pot smoking. If you think pot smoking doesn't affect teenagers, you're wrong. It does. And he gave up the pot, got his grades up, and I stayed till he graduated before I moved to Paso Robles because he didn't want to move to Paso Robles. I'm proud of my son. He's a member of AA now, and his email is ain't since 88. So alcohol or marijuana can be very bad if it is used wrong. If somebody wants to sit at their home and smoke cigarettes, fine. If they want to sit at their home and smoke pot, I don't care. But to get kids into smoking marijuana, you're just destroying your youth.
I had no intentions of speaking here tonight. Look at the shirt. I want to address the people that have just spoken about the danger of marijuana to youth and all that, and I completely agree. But I want you to realize that right now, any underage kid can go out to the park or whatever and get somebody to get them marijuana. You know what's harder? Getting them to buy a bottle of gin. Because it's regulated. There's a store. Somebody's livelihood is at stake. Right now, that's not the case. Regulation. It's too late. Marijuana's already out there. I'm sorry. I agree that you should not be getting high when they're 13. You know what? A storefront. Responsibility, regulation. You're talking about the concentration of it. Yeah, I completely agree. Regulation, legalization. It's already there. You're not going to stop it. Think about that side. Thank you.
If we would please just withhold applause. Thank you.
My name's Deborah Shriver. I have been a member of this community my entire life. My grandparents came here over 100 years ago, so I'm well rooted here. I am in favor of the retail establishments. You guys have hashed out the good, the bad, all that. What I would encourage the City Council to do is try to prioritize giving the licenses to our local people, not to the corporations. We need to give the licenses to the people who live here, who are raising their children here, and who have families here. Thank you.
My name is Freeman Fike. I understand that many people are concerned about the effects of marijuana, and one of the most harmful effects that I've seen in my lifetime is through the purchasing of illicit, black market sort of illegal operations. I've lost friends, I've lost family. You know, when it's not regulated, the operation can be in the hands of the wrong people. And I think when you have an adult use storefront, you're much more likely to have a regulated and responsible distribution and protect our city and our kids.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeff Wiesinger. I'm a local business owner and very much an advocate of retail sales of cannabis here in Paso Robles. I'm not sure I anticipated speaking tonight. I wanted to hear where the room was, and I think at this point I'd like to address the folks that are, or the concept that it's already here is extremely important. The folks that have this strong passion that are against it, I respect their passion, but I believe they're quite a few years late to the topic. We've already moved past this. There's already been regulation in place at the state level and at the county level. As a local business owner and a supporter of the Paso Robles community, I think it's like fiscally irresponsible of us to not consider the benefits that this could bring to our community. I feel pretty strongly that the local cannabis industry here in the county has done a fantastic job at regulating their businesses and managing themselves. Everybody seems to be in compliance. I'm far from an expert on any of this stuff, but as a local business owner and a person that is a supporter of our community, I believe 100% when it comes to how the alcohol industry in our community has been regulated, and they do a great job. We get as a local business owner, and I own a restaurant, and we are checked on when it comes to alcohol sales. I completely agreed with the other gentleman that spoke about the fact that there is an illicit market still in not just our community, but everywhere around the state of California. And I think that is a major issue that y'all might want to put a lot of effort into trying to address. But I believe strongly that we're at a point where regulations have already been, the framework is already there. Why would we not take advantage of the enormous tax revenues? Would the city council be able to earmark some of these funds to mental health, to schools? And I think that the amount of money that could be raised by having regulated cannabis sales within our community, I think it's a no-brainer. And I appreciate everyone's who's in favor of it and their support, and I'd love to hear some other comments. So thank you, guys.
You're not saying anything?
Good.
No, you go first.
My name is Stephen Herring. I wasn't going to speak on it tonight, and I won't get too into depth. I own multiple businesses here in Paso Robles and Templeton, born and raised here. The one thing that everybody I paid very close attention to the San Luis Obispo ordinance since 2017. The one thing that everybody kind of needs to take into consideration and just have an open mind, you know? I know there's a lot of people from different generations and areas of the state and so on and so forth. But San Luis Obispo County, they put a pretty strict ordinance on the legal cannabis industry here. The one thing that we need to take in consideration is any legal cannabis company here in San Luis Obispo pays for quarterly inspections. Those funds actually are funding the sheriffs and code enforcement to go out and crack down on the illicit market, which is getting a lot of that illicit stuff, the backdoor deals, away from downtown and so on and so forth. So that's one thing and it's a hefty amount too. Retailers pay the most, processing distribution pays a ton, and farms pay a ton too. So it's actually the tax revenue that's being generated right now by the farms, processing, distribution, and retail shops actually goes into enforcement for the illicit market. So I'll stop there, but I thought that was an interesting fact.
Hello. I'll just stand up real quick. My name's Marisa, and I'm actually a winemaker and Cal Poly graduate from the area, and I also made this. You may have seen this in Megan's, down in Slow. Camille, hi. I know, from like college. Anyways, I've been in the wine industry since 2009 when I graduated from Cal Poly, and saw kind of a need, being that one of my roommates was actually killed by a drunk driver in 2003. She was a Cal Poly or a Cuesta water polo and swim team person, and then after that had about 10 to 15 more alcohol-related deaths very close to me. 3 happened in 2019 of September. One was a heart attack that was induced by a fight between husband and wife, and one was a drunk driving accident, and the second or third was a suicide. That happened in Tennessee, where cannabis at the time was illegal, and had that person had the opportunity, because he was an opioid addict recovering, to have cannabis as an alternative, I do believe that he would still be alive today. I also have a lot of veteran friends that are firefighters, police officers of that nature, that would love to be able to use CBD gummies or things of that nature. They actually sweep their house every night before they go to bed. They were snipers in Afghanistan, and the VA very quickly prescribes them drugs. My husband's a nurse. He can use drugs, alcohol, any of the things, but cannabis, no. So this product is out of Napa and was produced by myself. And the CEO is from Constellation, Diageo, and Treasury Wine Estates. So just so you know, every single winery is working on legalization and production of products like this. This is alcohol removed. It is infused. I told Dubs like years ago that I was gonna make something like this for people. And in all actuality, sorry, I'm shaking, I'm very nervous. I also wasn't gonna speak tonight. But data provided by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, most recent national survey on drug use and health, finds that marijuana use fell significantly year over year among those ages 12 to 17. 25% decline because of regulation. So there's a lot of us actually in this county that are kind of behind the scenes when it comes to this. Napa Valley also just legalized medical and recreational sales and has dispensaries that are doing significantly well. And I do not doubt that those people will come here too. We have a lot of people coming from the cities. A lot of people that come here to drink wine at the wineries with their friends are sober. They might need an alternative. Sunstone Winery down in Santa Barbara just launched their Spirit, which is cannabis-infused seltzer. And they're the first winery to be allowed to grow cannabis and wine. So it's coming, and we're not trying to compete with what we have going on here, but there is a need for an alternative. Does your grandma have cancer? Does your mom have cancer? Can they eat a gummy? This is a social experience. People drink every day. I guarantee I can go to every single one of your houses and you have enough alcohol to kill school children. This has a cork and a child-resistant cap, which is a one-time use plastic waste. And these are our regulations. So I also teach HACCP, which is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point Food Safety for cannabis production. And I got accepted into a master's program with the University of Maryland School of Pharmaceuticals, Cannabis Therapeutics, because Cal Poly won't do it. Though Cal Poly is now part of Humboldt State and is going to be launching their cannabis program soon.
Hello, my name is Sunny Molinax, and I am a retailer. I am partners in Grover Beach, in a Grover Beach shop and Urban Leaf in Grover Beach, and then also in Vista, and gearing up to launch with my partner Patrick up there, gearing up to launch our mobile delivery in Paso Robles. And I think it's kind of neat tonight. We've all come to a consensus. We can all 100% agree that cannabis, hold on one second, cannabis, alcohol, probably TV, cell phone use, and cigarettes are all bad for kids. Nobody's going to dispute that one. I am here 100% to support legal cannabis in the city of Paso Robles. For those that don't know my story, in 2015, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. They were almost going to stop treatment for chemo because I wasn't responding well to the chemo and I'd lost too much weight. And a friend gave me a joint. I wasn't big into smoking pot then. I thought it just gave you the munchies and made you tired. Within 3 minutes, I was absolutely not nauseous, not sick. I actually felt hungry. And so for those that say anecdotal, there's enough studies in the National Archives of Medical Journals to say otherwise on multiple fronts. But I'd also like to look at the fiscal side. So if we look at other communities like Grover Beach, a lot of people have mentioned Grover Beach tonight. I'm part in Grover Beach, and I've seen the difference. With three dispensaries on board, they generated over $2 million a year. They transformed their industrial area as part of their cannabis application process. They didn't allow it downtown. They allowed it only in the industrial area, and part of their application process was to take a blighted building and bring it into something great, and it transformed it. They do have 26 licenses right now, so 3 are open to, actually they just opened their 4th dispensary, which is too many for that area, but they do have some traffic from Pismo. But Grover, since they don't allow it in their downtown, they've had just a great resurgence in their industrial area. And if Paso, cannabis fiscal impact could provide needed resources for children's programs, public safety, homeless programs, roads, and even pickleball. As we saw from the HDL slideshow, the black market is 2/3 of cannabis sales. They have no regulation whatsoever. And we even saw before licensing in the state of California in 2007, which happened in 2018. In 2017, they ran studies on all the product that was in the state of California. 92% of the products in the California in 2017 showed adulterants for mold, which is the mycotoxins. Those can cause brain issues. They never address that in any of the discussions tonight. Also, black market products are shown to have insecticides, herbicides, rodent hairs, and so much more. And then on the manufactured side of the black market, it's even worse. It's just imperative to have regulated product. So we do need to stop the black market. As we heard, a child passed from fentanyl-laced joint. That was the black market that took your child down, and I'm so sorry. That just broke my heart tonight. We need to stop that, and that is inundating. One time I came to the city and I said, look, you have 65 mobile businesses that are illegal running through your community. The only one that was licensed was Dubs, so kudos to you. And so it's good that we're starting to see more licenses, and the city is being very proactive on that. To address, there was a comment about cash only, and I wanted to address that really quickly. Right now, we have 3 types of payments that we take in dispensaries. They have a mobile ATM. It processes, you use your debit card. You can link your bank account and just automatically do credit card, bank account transactions. But just like any other business, we are charged 3.5% per transaction. We prefer cash, just like any restaurant, just like any other operation. It's to avoid the transaction fees. So I am asking the council to move forward with dispensaries and sales. And then just so everybody, if you're looking for cannabis studies, it's under PubMed, which is the National Archive of Medical Journals. It has some really great information. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in real quick before our next speaker, just to do a quick time check. We're at 7:25. We're going to get everybody in, so no worries. We're going to push through. We do actually have about 6 callers on the line as well. So once we're done in person, we're going to transition over to those callers, but we'll keep going. Thank you.
I have a really brief comment. My name is Susie Apkarian. I was born and raised here in Paso Robles, so I go back a bit. In my opinion, it is not a financial decision for our city, but rather a moral dilemma. Think hard and fast what you want our wonderful town to look like, not just for ourselves, but our children and grandchildren as well, which is very near future.
My name is Linda Healy. I'm a Bearcat also from years actually before Susie was. And I've spent the last 45 years in Los Angeles County as a police officer. I started out on the California Highway Patrol, and then I was with Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. At one point in time, I was in charge of the largest women's jail in the country. I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of women over the years. And my heart went out to them in many occasions, and in some occasions not so much. But one of the things that I believe you mentioned, that marijuana is not a gateway drug. Well, I can point to several thousands of people, both men and women, in the county of Los Angeles for whom it was a gateway drug. The vast majority of the drug abusers in the LA County system started with marijuana. The problem is, when you take your first drink of alcohol, or you first, puff on a joint, or whatever you call it, I'm obviously not schooled in the vernacular, you don't know whether you're the one person that is going to want to take it further and further and further. Neither do the kids. Neither do kids that are 21 years old. Do they know? And another point, I wasn't going to say this much. All I want to say is that I don't think downtown is a proper place to have a storefront marijuana store. I love the downtown area. I came back to San Luis, to Paso Robles because of that park. I played on that old, dangerous merry-go-round that used to be there. But that, because of the conversations, many of you talked about medical marijuana, and that argument was used to justify your belief that marijuana is okay. So my points are, medical marijuana may work. I don't know, I'm not an expert in it. The lady in the back spoke about medical marijuana and seemed to have a lot of facts about it. I do know that for thousands and thousands, and I'm talking about LA County over the past 60 years, there are dead people. There is, your statistic about people haven't died of cannabis is wrong, dead wrong. And for the people who don't have whatever that, or who have the gene that says that you're going to be an addictive personality, it is a very dangerous way to start. But that doesn't mean anything, because in the wisdom of our state legislatures, marijuana is now legal. So what I had intended to say after I got through disputing some of the things I'm hearing is not in our downtown. I came back to Paso Robles because it is a fabulous place to live. I spent a lot of years in Los Angeles and Orange County. I do not want to go back there. You do not want Paso Robles to become another Los Angeles County. And my final comment is to the people on the city councils. In my career, I was a chief of police for 6 cities. And at the same time. So I had a lot of dealings with city managers, city councilmen, and so forth. There is something that happens when you choose to become a city council member, and that is that you want to do the best you can for your community. You want to do everything you can possibly do, and it all takes money. And then along comes storefront marijuana. God, can you make a lot of money with that? Don't do it. Do what Susie says. Decide it on a moral issue. It's not good to have, especially in the downtown area, a storefront marijuana. And that's all. Am I passionate? Yes, I am.
My name's Linnell Soxman. I'm from Paso Robles, and a lot of the things have been touched on already, but I'm just getting the feeling that a lot of this is to do with money. It's all about the money, whether you're somebody who wants to open a storefront or you're the city of Paso Robles, and I think it should be more than just the money. We're going to have a vote in November on increasing the TOT tax. We're going to be getting extra revenue if we have storefronts. I just don't think that's the way to fund the city, is through increased taxation on some of these things. I don't know, I looked at the arrest records for Paso Robles Police for August 7th through 14th, and out of 39 arrests, there were 19 that were alcohol related, and the other 7 were drug related. So overall, 26 out of 39 arrests were to do with some sort of substance. So I also worry about our first responders, how the police are going to be able to deal with perhaps an increase in some of this. You know, you look at statistics from places like the National Institute of Drug Research, and those are facts. They're not generational. They're just pure facts. And, you know, regulation isn't going to stop people from having problems with alcohol or drugs. It just isn't. You can regulate the THC levels all you want, and I know medicinally and lots of responsible recreational users, but it's still going to create problems no matter how you look at it. So I think you need to think about it. And you know, you were talking about the gene, and there is that, it's called AKT1 gene variation. And of course, you're not going to know if you have it or not. But people who do have it are 7 times likelier to have the risk of developing psychosis. And you don't know any of that till you get involved. So there's a human cost, there's a financial cost, and I guess the council's going to have to do their best, but I would think in the downtown core anyway, it's not a good place for having storefronts.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sarah Tomasetti. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I want to say that the presentation was really enlightening and very well done. My mother-in-law is 75 years old. She was taking Ambien for many, many years because she's unable to sleep. And about 4 years ago, she decided that she just could not deal with the side effects anymore. So she came to us and asked if we had any ideas. So we drove to Grover Beach and we got her some CBD edibles. And she has not taken Ambien since then. She's 75 years old. And quite frankly, we are concerned about her having to drive 45 minutes each way to go get the edibles. I would love to have her be able to visit a store here, and it doesn't have to be downtown. It can be out in the industrial area. For those of you who've never visited a dispensary, I encourage you to. I was so surprised. They're clean, they're quite lovely, they're very well run, and they are very rigorously regulated. There's been a lot of talk tonight about marijuana being a gateway drug. And I think one thing that we can all agree on is that kids are going to get it and smoke it regardless. They're not going to be doing that, buying it at a dispensary though. The data that we saw tonight showed that the demand is there, and not allowing retail stores is not going to stop the demand, but it will help enforce regulations. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Deborah Scarborough. I'm a longtime resident here. I live a couple blocks away on in the old Doc Kennedy house. I'm lucky to have that house. I don't know how I got it. And I am also with a partner in Moms, and we would love to be in this area, like really badly. And we do think that I'm going to go back to talking about like the ordinance advice that I'd like to give. I think it would be better if it was based on merit, because I noticed in that questionnaire that was sent out that there was a lottery question, and I think that then you're just kind of like, who are you going to get? And also definitely focus on your local people. And what else do I want to say? There was something really important, but I've forgotten it. So, but thank you all for listening.
Hi, my name is Christy Kelly, and I'm the former executive director of the Cancer Support Community. And I come from a different perspective. Cancer is not generational, and it's not something that anybody chooses. But it comes with a set of symptoms that are ravage the body when they're going through their treatment, the chemotherapy, radiation, vomiting, nausea, sleeplessness, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've seen firsthand through treating over 3,000 to 4,000 cancer patients and their families what the benefits can be. I would love to see something locally that's accessible, that family members can help their cancer loved ones while they're going through this battle. And I hope Paso Robles thinks long and hard and makes that available.
Hi, I'm Lauren Shannon. I'm a holistic health practitioner, an educator, and I have my degree in early childhood education. We went to college together. Yeah. I'm also an athlete. I represent San Luis Obispo County for the global company of Lululemon. So I get to represent athletes. My families are athletes, my children are athletes, and I want a storefront that we can walk into for education. As someone who works with thousands of clients globally, and as an athlete for a global company, I need a place for people to go and have safe access locally. Delivery companies are amazing, but they are intimidating. I've actually never used a delivery company. I think that it's a beautiful scenario, but for someone who is an educator, I need to walk into a facility and get educated. I have come from the policy of learning by doing, and I want that. I want that education, and I want it for people who are going through cancer, or for athletes who, a lot of us don't drink, but we need to do something that will relieve our pain, our trauma, and I just really want a storefront for this town, and it doesn't need to be downtown. It needs to be somewhere safe and protected, and I want that money to go back into our community. I have access to large grants, and I work on these grants to give this money back into our community for our children. And I want money for our first responders, for those that protect and serve us. So I'm really a middle ground person, and I hear where everyone's coming from too. So thank you for sharing.
Hello, my name is Patrick Shannon. I am in the cannabis industry. I have a dispensary down in San Diego currently, and we're working on opening delivery here in Paso Robles currently. I am for adult use and retail storefronts in Paso Robles area, and I I do agree with them not being in the downtown Paso Robles area for different reasons. I mean, my reason really revolves around, there's already a large traffic and parking issue in the area, and cannabis retail stores do bring in a lot of traffic and a lot of people. So I think having it outside of downtown would be beneficial for the downtown. Two of my grandfathers have both had cancer and have both since passed. And when I was there for them and was able to, and neither of them smoked cannabis at all their entire lives. And at that point in their life, they needed it. It gave them dignity. It allowed them at times when they were in such pain to be able to put a smile on their face. And you could see that you could talk to them and be there with them. And I think there's a larger medical need than people realize, and it's not a red herring. It's a very real situation, and so many of us will go through this in our lives. Kind of going through listening to what a lot of people said, and different things that have been said tonight. I do greatly feel for that young man who died of a fentanyl overdose that was laced with marijuana, and that is an absolute direct reaction situation based on a black market and fears that people have regarding legal cannabis. It's like, without that regulation, you have these people that are out there just to make money, that are in this black market, that are just trying to make an extra buck. So they buy some crappy cannabis and then they put fentanyl in it because they're trying to get people hooked so that they can continue making money. Or whatever reason they decide that they're going to put something like that into cannabis or anything else. And that's what gets solved with regulation. That's what gets solved when the state and the city and the county step in and go, hey, we're not going to allow for this anymore. Correlation is not causation. The idea that homelessness and crime are because cannabis is starting to be legalized throughout many of the states. Rents have never been higher. People have a harder time, getting a home. Inflation has never been higher, which is causing the people that are in lower socioeconomic, situations to maybe seek out crime to be able to feed their family or whatever reasons they might have. So I just say that, there's a lot of reasons that things happen, and let's not just jump to the conclusion that it's because of cannabis legalization. And again, the gateway drug idea, I kind of believed in the idea of that, but the idea of the gateway drug was that it's been illegal. So the guy that's selling you your marijuana is also the same guy that has the other drugs. And when you make that accessible to these children, when there is an opportunity to sell marijuana, that's how that gateway, that's where the gateway is. It's not necessarily that marijuana itself is the gateway. It just happens to be the first thing that you're buying from that drug dealer who's then going to push the next product on you. And again, that is something that will not happen in a regulated market. So, I that was a little bit more than I was really expecting to get into, but thank you guys very, very much, and I appreciate it.
My name's Tom Apkarian. I've lived in this community for quite a long time, listening to all the pluses and minuses of this program. Question is, bottom line is, we're all talking about money, and we forget what will that money be used for? Will a city council designate it for a specific purpose or go in a general fund? And my other reason would be, what will the cost of public service like the police and fire and ambulance, will that price go up for maintaining, having that dispensary here or storefront? Everybody's talking about medical marijuana. That is great. I mean, everybody cites good reasons for having it, and I'm all in favor. I know people have had it, and it's helped them with their migraines and everything else. Why can't you distribute it through that distributing lines? Or do you need a doctor to get the medicine? I'm not sure. For clarifications on that, why not just get it delivered to you instead of having a storefront? A storefront, looking at your map, even if it was down by the fairgrounds, is going to pull people from all over the area. You will have a giant traffic area, guarantee. But then you have another issue of how late it's going to be open and all those things. So questions I've heard, well, you won't have kids getting it. Kids are going to get it. The store is going to be, you've got to be 21 if I understood it. So who's going to give, how are you going to maintain and monitor the drugs and alcohol? Alcohol's a problem, drugs are a problem. Now we're just adding another issue to the mix for the community. So what is the right answer? Community, like my wife said, it is a moral issue. There is a need for it, but if you're going after the money won't be there. We'll end up spending it on something else, or you'll have to spend it on additional services to support it. Bottom line, you're looking at money for kids at school, won't be there, guarantee you. It'll be all dissipated away, guaranteed.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I believe we have 5 callers. So we're going to go to them real quick, and then we'll wrap up and talk about next steps. So we'll go over here.
Serena.
We have 5 callers.
Yes.
So we're going to go to them.
Go ahead.
And then we'll wrap up.
Yes. Can I start? Hello? Yes, please go ahead. Okay. I am a medical doctor, and I have practiced for over 35 years in general practice. We've been decades as members of this community, and I am a local business owner. I would like all of us to keep an open mind, because I'm about to present some facts on this rather controversial topic. I must put into the legal record the ethical burdens that you all need to have to preserve the health and well-being of our community, with decisions that, much like cigarette producers fail to truthfully face and act upon. I want to give you the science and then the effects on the community at the end. I feel I am obligated to have you aware and to inform the community of what is known and scientifically proven about marijuana, besides advocating its health benefits for treatment of the things you've heard about: chronic pain, cancer, anorexia, glaucoma, seizures, chemotherapy-induced nausea, although sometimes there's a paradoxical effect that's called hyperemesis syndrome in some people where it gets worse, not better. Nonetheless, there are many, many indications for medical use. But I'm talking about increasing storefronts now and where to put them and how many to put them. So you as a community have a responsibility to consider all the factors that will promote health and well-being. So let's look at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, although they have recently been in the news. Nonetheless, they have done some studies, and they show that along with many other studies, the Mayo Clinic, the NIH, the New England Journal, they show that marijuana use directly affects the areas of the brain responsible for memory, learning, attention, decision-making, coordination, emotions, and reaction time, like driving. Short-term effects are proven to impair memory, attention, learning, complex tasks, coordination, and I already said driving reaction time. So increases in motor vehicle accidents, decreased verbal memory. Those are definitely proven, not only in youth, but in adults. Long-term use, depending on the duration, the potency of the THC, and the frequency of use, have even more striking effects. So if a mother during pregnancy or breastfeeding uses it, there is evidence now from the National Institute of Child Health and Development and Health Canada that there'll be long-lasting harm to the child's memory and often irreversible. The Brain Research Journal talks about the effects on the hippocampus, where teenagers, and you know they're going to get it, even if you have a restriction on age, that there are effects where they will perform 18% worse in long-term memory tests than non-users. We have a new study. It's the new Canadian Neuroscientist Studies. And what does it show? It shows cannabis use was linked to impairments in working memory and inhibitory control required for self-control. The deficits in memory recall and perceptual reasoning was proven. We have an NIH Duke University study. Early age marijuana use shows a loss of IQ measured in points lost, not restored if you quit later on. I have pregnancy studies also advocating that pregnant women, breastfeeding women, not use it because of memory, attention, and problem-solving deficits in the children, well proven. Schizophrenia patients worsen their psychotic symptoms when exposed to marijuana use, even though it's used for depression and anxiety relief. In certain individuals who are prone to have an adverse effect, quite the opposite occurs. And again, long and short-term especially short-term memory loss proven with increased depression also by the Mayo Clinic studies. I want to talk about decreased sperm counts, decreased testosterone in males, and it can even cause gynecomastia, which is male breast formation. The British Medical Cancer Journal associated it, and I want you to listen, with increased rates of testicular cancer with marijuana use. And minor effects, increased periodontal gum disease, dry mouth. We know the highly respected New England Journal of Medicine has shown that long-term use leads, believe it or not, to 9% addiction, as high as 16% addiction in those starting consumption, especially vulnerable teenagers. Who's to say that at age 21 this stops? And it goes up to 25% addiction and dependency with daily consistent use. We have studies showing impairment of the neural connectivity, the fimbria of the hippocampus, directly affecting learning and memory. The subcortical networks that affect inhibitory control, increased anxiety and depression. So let me jump to the conclusions on what is the social cost, the health cost to society, to our community, the economic cost when we promote it. Well, think of our community, our wonderful attraction of our community by tourists. Well, we have here wedding and musical venues, water parks, recreational parks, the lake, wine tasting, hospitality, restaurants, and hotels. Contrast this with what I've seen in other cities, big billboards with big ads about marijuana use, loitering at dispensaries, homelessness, mental health problems, policing problems, traffic and parking issues, unsafe driving because it's impaired attention, increase health costs to the community. So what do I conclude? I truly think well, number one, avoid billboards. Don't let increased dispensaries and storefronts be in our community and change that beautiful small town charm we have that brings people to our community. Don't approve additional storefronts. For sure, don't put them in downtown. And to tell you the truth, I don't want them over by Golden Hill or in those other industrial communities either. I think it's possible to have alternatives. You need to discuss this with great concern of the ethical and moral issues, and finally, health issues. I implore you. Thank you.
Larry.
Finally, health issues.
Larry, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Larry Lipke. I've lived in the county for 30 years now with a successful business. I have adult children and grandchildren. My call today is to voice my support for retail cannabis businesses offering adult use, preferably in industrial areas. I don't believe that having these dispensaries will in any way influence our youth to smoke cannabis. I have children that are adult, grandchildren, and I don't have the fears about cannabis that I've been hearing from some of the other commentators tonight. And so I just want to be that caller that isn't trying to open a business and make money on it. And I'm also not trying to convince people of the fears about it that they have about it. I'm pretty sure that those people that have the fears that have spoken tonight probably do not smoke cannabis and will not be going into any of the dispensaries once they are open. But I would like to have a dispensary. I do not want to continue using delivery services. I would like to be able to go into the store and see what's available, different varieties, what I can choose from, as opposed to just having somebody come over to my house with the delivery. So I am in support of having retail, adult use, cannabis businesses, 2 or 3 of them in the city of Paso Robles. Thank you.
Sean, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Awesome. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone for spending the time here and voicing their opinions. I think it's really important for all of us to talk and let our voices be heard. With that said, I do agree with a lot of what you guys have said and obviously disagree with some others. Larry, I feel pretty strongly with you that I'm in favor of storefront cannabis being opened here in Paso. I am born and raised in Paso. Let me look through my list here, excuse me. Obviously, the tax revenue that could benefit our community could be very helpful, but that's not the only thing that makes me believe that we should have these here locally. I think safety has been brought up. Obviously, unfortunately, the gentleman who passed away with fentanyl is concerning for all of us. And as it's already been stated, that is something that is directly attributed to the black market. And that is something that wouldn't happen if we did have storefronts. So I think that's something that we should all take into consideration. Also, a lot of people have brought up, drugs and illegal drugs. And it's just interesting to me what we consider drugs. We have a lot of pharmaceutical drugs, and if you've listened to any of the advertisements on TV, you could hear the long list of adverse side effects that a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs, involve. I think it's just interesting that we have what is a naturally occurring plant here that grows in the wild and can be grown completely organic. That obviously poses a lot of benefits for the medical industry and those that are suffering from all the things that Serena had said, which thank you, Serena, for bringing up all that valuable information. My sister had cancer, and I can definitely tell you that cannabis helped her significantly with nausea and loss of appetite and quality of life. That's obviously something that California has already passed, and I think that recreational cannabis is just the next step. It seems like a logical step in my mind. We've been talking about, unsafe driving. I think it's interesting that nobody here has pointed out the fact that we have 200 plus wineries pouring wine, day in and day out, that obviously pose a health and safety risk to anyone driving on the roads. So I think that's something that, can be mitigated, obviously, with good decision making. As others stated earlier, a lot of that depends on the parents, and parents need to be there to supervise their kids, to give them proper guidance, and not rely on the state to do that for them. Obviously, I was a child at one point, and I can definitely tell you that it was easier. I'm a local resident here of Paso, born and raised. It was easier when I was a kid here to get marijuana than it was to get alcohol. And as we've all done throughout our life, we do a little bit of exploration and we try things. And obviously, as I think Patrick was saying, sometimes when you go to that dealer and, he's got the next thing, you might want to try that. Being in a more regulated setting, I think would help people to not necessarily take that next step. Obviously, we've brought up the gateway drug thing, which in my mind is, again, interesting that nobody talks about alcohol or cigarettes. In my experience, most people start drinking first, then they may start smoking cigarettes and weed, and then move on to other things. But obviously, that's a choice that you make, that we all make. And those choices are going to be in front of us, whether you like it or not. Let me go through a couple other things. Pharmaceuticals, yeah. So the other thing, I guess, about drugs is how many people die or get hooked on antidepressants or painkillers, and so on and so forth. So pharmaceutical drugs, I don't think, are necessarily safe. And I think that's a discussion that we can all talk about. I would like to hear somebody give me an example of somebody overdosing on cannabis, because I've never heard of that. At any rate, I believe I've covered most of my points. Again, I just want to thank everyone for being here, for expressing themselves, and for the City Council. I know you guys have a tough job to do. I think that we're all adults here. We're all Americans, and I believe in freedom of choice. And I think that we should have that freedom to make that choice. I guess one last thing, my girlfriend right now is also suffering from some autoimmune disease, and we end up going down to San Luis to get CBD gummies for her. And it is really nice to go into a storefront and talk to somebody who has a lot more knowledge on the products that they're selling, has experience in that realm. It would be akin to going to maybe a tasting room and asking, the attendants what the wine is about and how does it taste and how does it affect you and what does it pair well with. And so I think this is all good information for legal users, and I think that they should have that right to do that. I guess, sorry, one more thing. I do agree with most everyone here tonight. I don't think that these dispensaries should be in the downtown area, nor should they be close to schools or churches for that matter. I think that we should keep these in an area that is more commercial, away from children, and obviously has good parking and good traffic flow. With that, I'll thank you guys again and have a good evening.
April, are you there?
Yep, here I am.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm April Price, and I am the owner of a cannabis travel agency called Highway Travel. I've been doing cannabis tourism since 2008. And recently it's become the big buzz, so to speak. Forbes recently published an article saying that cannabis tourism is a $25 billion industry, and it is just getting started. I do education-based cannabis tours. I've worked with cannabis patients, lawyers, doctors, teachers. I work with senior citizens, teaching them about cannabis, the canna-curious, and we do a lot of education here, and a lot of community outreach goes along with that. I'm a member of the South County Chambers of Commerce, and they welcomed me with open arms. And what Patrick said earlier, he was talking about his grandparents and getting real emotional about that, and I was feeling him right along. It's all about compassionate care. People deserve the accessibility to be able to, soothe themselves with cannabis with their most during those most desperate days. Those days when you just can't get relief, and we've all had those terrible days or seen people that we love suffering like that. I agree with Sean on the drinking and driving. I've been waiting for somebody to say that. We've got all these wineries. I've seen so many people swerving on the roads. When the wineries are closing, people are not testing them to see if they're sober. So, if that was something that was to be discussed, I'm sure a lot of people would be really upset about testing people to see if they were okay to drive leaving the wineries. As far as cannabis tourism is concerned, cannabis tourism trickles into other businesses. People will come here and they will stay. Of course, they'll stay for the weed, they'll stay for the wine. But cannabis tourism attracts foodies, and we are known for our delicious food scene. So consider the positives. I know that there's a lot of quote-unquote reefer madness out there, and we are coming from a lot of different generations, and I do want to offer my condolences for the young man who did pass from the fentanyl-laced cannabis. That's definitely, absolutely black market, out of the realm of regulation, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Robert, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak on this topic. I've lived in Paso for about 5 years, and I've been involved in cannabis media for almost 30 years, so I do have some background on this topic. And I just wanted to address some of the objections that have been raised, as well as reinforce some of the positive points that have been made, because I'm hearing a lot of the same disinformation, drug war hysteria type of views that we've been hearing for decades. So I'd like to just address a few of the objections, if I may. One being youth access. The reason the law is called adult use is because it means just that, adult use. No one is advocating to give access to cannabis to children. If teenagers want cannabis, they can already get it illegally, as they always have been able to since probably the 60s or before. Dispensaries, legal storefront dispensaries, would not allow youth to get access to it. And data has shown that municipalities across the country that legalize cannabis do not see a significant increase in use among the youth. Another topic that was brought up, which has been brought up several times, is the unfortunate person who died from a fentanyl overdose through fentanyl-laced cannabis. Now, I think we can all agree that fentanyl is a very dangerous substance, but cannabis is not. Cannabis is not something you can overdose on. It is not something you can die from. And it is literally impossible to get fentanyl-laced cannabis from a licensed dispensary. In fact, that very argument makes the argument for legal dispensaries, because that poor person who died from the fentanyl-laced cannabis would never have died if they had had access to a legal dispensary. Another objection that was brought up is that, well, it's not just about the money, and it isn't just about the money. It's about access. It's about access for seniors. It's about access for disabled people. It's about access for veterans suffering from PTSD, and all other kinds of people who can't or won't feel comfortable driving 45 minutes to an hour down to Grover Beach or to some other location to access this medicine. Another point that was brought up was auto accidents and crime. And again, I will say there have been numerous studies that have shown that those driving under the influence of cannabis are far safer drivers than those who drive under the influence of alcohol. Now, I'm not saying that that's an excuse that people should be allowed to drive under the influence of cannabis. Of course not. I'm merely pointing out that, you know, we live in a town where we are surrounded by hundreds of bars, liquor stores, wineries, breweries, and tasting rooms. Alcohol is far more dangerous to those using it and those around them than cannabis has ever been. But I don't hear anyone proposing shutting down all the bars and liquor stores or shutting down the wineries. So I feel like this argument is really kind of silly to say, oh, you know, cannabis stores, if we allow one or two cannabis stores in the town, it's going to somehow degrade the moral character of the town when we're surrounded by people, you know, drinking constantly. You know, I'm hearing a lot of very closed-minded prohibitionist fear-mongering kind of arguments. Now, the dispensaries don't have to be on Spring Street. No one's saying they have to be on Spring Street. They can be in whatever logical location the city council decides is appropriate. But they need to be accessible. They need to be within a short driving distance for people that need it. And I will also point out that pharmacies have far more dangerous and addictive drugs than cannabis in them with far less security. I mean, does Rite Aid have armed guards and you know, constant 24-hour surveillance the way dispensaries do? You know, it seems to me that this is just basic prejudice against cannabis. It's not really about the perceived harms. It's about an older generation feeling, you know, having the mentality of growing up with the idea that cannabis was a drug and drugs are bad. So the bottom line is cannabis has been around. It's a naturally occurring plant on the earth, created by God. It's been around for thousands of years. There have been no deaths and no overdoses from it. In fact, it is one of the safest, most therapeutic substances on the planet. And regardless of how you feel about cannabis, it is here to stay. It will always be here. So the question is not, is cannabis good or bad, or is it right for you or right for me? The question is, should adults who want access to it be able to get that access in a safe, clean way? And the answer to that question, I believe, should be yes. Thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes our callers. So at this point, that concludes the public comments. We really want to thank everyone. This has been a great session. I know we're a little bit over our allotted time tonight, but that just shows how much interest there is in this topic. Just a couple reminders. This presentation will be on the website. If it's not already up there, it'll be on there tomorrow, prcity.com. So if you're wanting a copy of the presentation by Ajay, please check that out. Survey, just a reminder, that closes September 5th. Again, available at prcity.com. We encourage you to take it. Email comments. If for whatever reason you did not speak tonight or didn't have a chance to make it into the call-in queue before that was ended, please email comments to info@prcity.com, and we will include those as part of the comment period here as well. Finally, as I mentioned, we are trying to get this back to the City Council for discussion on an October agenda. I think that those dates are either going to be October 4th or the 21st. We haven't landed on one just yet. But what you can do, again, go to prcity.com, go to the agenda page. There's a button to get notified of future agendas. If you're not already signed up, you can get an email. You can take a look at that agenda, see if it's on there. It's likely going to be a discussion item. It'll be very clearly labeled. The topic will be. So again, if you have any questions after this, info@prcity.com is going to be a good bet. Otherwise, we're available in the city manager's office as well for any questions. Thank you. The question was, who gets the data from the survey? That survey data will be part of the city council packet in October. Yes, that is public information. All right. With that, again, thank you all for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.